This is Mark Gunn Media.
Hit it!
Welcome to Gunshots Straight from the Hip. I'm your host, Mark Gunn. The views expressed on this program are those of the host and guests and not necessarily reflective of anyone or any entity associated with this broadcast. This episode brought to you by Before Your First Gig, an audiobook written by Steve Dustcircle and produced by Mark Gunn Media. If you're a beginning musician, this is a primer that you'll definitely want to hear. Tips and strategies for setting yourself up for live performances and paid gigs. Before Your First Gig by Steve Dustcircle. Available now on iTunes, Audible.com, and Amazon. Before Your First Gig by Steve Dustcircle. Produced by Mark Gunn Media. This episode, Super Tuesday. That's that. What's next? All right, now that the smoke is cleared from this past Super Tuesday, a few things stood out for me. Biden pretty much swept the whole thing, especially in the South.
They don't call Super Tuesday for nothing. It's a good night. It's a good night.
While Sanders picked up wins in his home state of Vermont, Colorado, Utah, and a huge win in California.
Tonight, I tell you with absolute confidence, we are going to win the Democratic nomination.
However, Sanders did lose Oklahoma and Minnesota, two states that he won back in 2016. As of this episode, Biden still leads the delegate count, but not by much. The magic number to secure the nomination is 1,991. Few other things that stood out for me. 1. Biden's win wasn't supposed to happen. Up until the South Carolina primary, Sanders was the clear frontrunner. Biden put all of his eggs in the basket of black South Carolina voters, and it paid off. 2. Minority Whip Jim Clyburn's endorsement wasn't a done deal. It can be said that his giving Biden the nod allowed those who were undecided to pull the trigger for Biden. Clyburn didn't make up his mind until about 2 weeks before the primary. Number 3. Voter turnout, according to some figures, increased by over 100,000 people in Virginia alone over 2016. Lots of the early vote count, those that had voted before the South Carolina primary, had Sanders with a fairly healthy lead. Number 4. The youth vote that Sanders counted on did not show up for him. Some estimates indicate that only 1 out of every 8 voters was between the ages of 18 and 49, a demographic that Sanders had locked up back in 2016. Number 5. This was a generational primary, with Biden getting the majority of the older vote and Sanders getting what youth vote that there was. A fatal flaw in the Sanders campaign was the inability to grow his base. Even with the help of surrogates like Senator Nina Turner, his support among black voters of any age lags behind that of Biden's. 6. Given the horrible showing Mike Bloomberg and Elizabeth Warren had, they've pretty much been shown the door. No word on Warren's plans, but there is speculation that she may be positioning herself for a vice presidential slot.
You don't get what you don't fight for. I am in this fight.
Famous last words. Bloomberg has dropped out of the race and has endorsed Joe Biden. CNN's Christine Alicia explains.
Michael Bloomberg announcing to staff that he is leaving the campaign. He sends an email to the staff saying, 3 months ago, I entered the race for president to defeat Donald Trump. Today, I'm leaving the race for the same reason, to defeat Donald Trump, because it's clear to me that staying in would make achieving that goal more difficult. I'm a believer in using data to inform decisions. After yesterday's results, the delegate math has become virtually impossible, and a viable path to nomination no longer exists.
He spent $500 million of his own money and only got 4 delegates to show for it. Could he use his wallet to angle for the VP slot? We've got another round of primaries coming up next week. We'll look at possible scenarios and play a game of what if right after this. Before Your First Gig, an audiobook written by Steve Dustcircle and produced by Mark Gunn Media. If you're a beginning musician, this is a primer that you'll definitely want to hear. Tips and strategies for setting yourself up for live performances and paid gigs. Before Your First Gig by Steve Dustcircle. Available now on iTunes, Audible.com, and Amazon. Before Your First Gig by Steve Dustcircle. Produced by Mark Gunn Media. For downloads of this and past episodes and information about all the multimedia services we offer, log on to our website at www.markgunmedia.com. That's markgunmedia.com. Welcome back to Gunshots Straight from the Hip. I'm Mark Gunn. We're looking at the fallout from this past Super Tuesday, where former Vice President Joe Biden made what analysts are calling a comeback after winning the South Carolina primary in dominating fashion.
It was a very big night for Biden. Really, in the past 5 days or so, he brought his campaign back to life. He did take 9 states, including Texas, North Carolina, and Virginia, so 3 of the 4 most delegate-rich states. Sanders took California, according to the Associated Press. It's important to remember that just because someone won the state does not mean that they take all of the delegates in that state, as long as another candidate reached the 15% threshold. So we'll have to see how some of these delegates shake out here. But it is clearly a 2-person race in the battle for delegates at this point.
The race to get to 1,991 delegates continues as Biden and Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders continue to fight for the Democratic presidential nomination. Former New York City Mayor Mike Bloomberg and Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren have ended their campaigns. Bloomberg joins Amy Klobuchar, Pete Buttigieg, Beto O'Rourke, and Tom Steyer in throwing their support to Joe Biden. No word on what Warren's going to do. Democratic strategist Linda Tran.
We have to look at the broader landscape of everything that's been happening in this kind of moment-to-moment dynamic, the drama that we've seen so far this primary season. What we've witnessed over the last 10 days or so is that decency and public service still matter. And in this case, they seem to have mattered much more than dollars and much more than operation. It's not that ground game doesn't matter. It's not that resources don't matter. But the fact that people have had this long-standing relationship with the former vice president, that they feel like they know who he is, and in fact that they very much like who he is. I think the fact that we've been able to have these more moderate candidates coalesce around him as well just gave people a signal that this is still the guy that you thought he was, and it's okay for you to throw your support behind him. In fact, you should be enthusiastic about it. So I think it's really a testament to Joe Biden's, more than 4 decades of public service.
So far, the delegate count has Biden leading. 6 more states have primaries coming up on the 10th. Idaho, Michigan, Mississippi, Missouri, North Dakota, and Washington State. Biden is expected to carry Mississippi, and Sanders will have to do well in at least 3 of the 6 states in order to keep the contest close. I'm starting to see a lot of people whining about the Super Tuesday results when they shouldn't be. There's still a long way to go before the convention. People have to realize that America is still a center-right country, and for a majority of those that have already voted, getting rid of Donald Trump takes precedence over everything else. A sad commentary about this country's political system. When your entire election is predicated on simply getting rid of the other guy, there's a real problem with the system. Outside of that, according to a CBS News exit poll, the most important issues to Democrats are health care at 36%, climate change at 23%, race relations at 19%, and income inequality at 18%. Coming up, I'm going to kind of look into my crystal ball. We'll have some fun with a few top-of-the-ticket scenarios as I explore different combinations for the president and vice presidential slots. We'll see what you think right after this. If you're an advertiser, one of the most important things about getting your message out is actually standing out from the rest of the crowd. If you're listening to this program right now, this is where you'd hear your commercial. As an exclusive sponsor of Gunshots Straight from the Hip, your commercial is professionally produced and gets a longer shelf life based on your needs. Gunshots Straight from the Hip is a unique and compelling program unlike anything else in the marketplace. Episodes are available for download on iTunes, TuneIn, and markgunmedia.com. And depending on how you tailor your message, the potential for new and repeat customers is that much greater. Best of all, it's extremely cost-effective. If you'd like more information on how you can be a sponsor of this broadcast, call Mark Gunn Media, Inc. at 502-407-0283. That's 502-407-0283. Or log on to markgunmedia.com. For downloads of this and past episodes and information about all the multimedia services we offer, log on to our website at www.markgunmedia.com. That's markgunmedia.com. Welcome back to Gunshots Straight from the Hip. We're looking at the fallout from this past Super Tuesday. I'm Mark Gunn. At the end of the day, knowing what we know about the majority of the Democratic electorate so far, I thought it would be fun to take a look at a few top-of-the-ticket scenarios. It's pretty much a two-man race, but what do Biden and Sanders have to do to win moving forward? Once again, Democratic strategist Linda Tran.
The African American voters are extraordinarily important in determining who the eventual Democratic nominee happens to be. But I think the real takeaway here is that Donald Trump was right to fear Joe Biden. He is, as we're witnessing, he is reassembling the Obama coalition, the so-called Obama coalition, in a lot of ways, because beyond these African-American voters, he is also drawing support more broadly among voters of color. He's drawing support from suburban voters, especially women. We saw that from the exit polls. And of course, there are also some college-educated young voters that he is bringing into the fold. And if he continues on this trajectory moving forward throughout the rest of the primary season, it's really his race to lose. It's hard to see how he doesn't continue to gain traction and momentum.
And Bernie Sanders?
It's a great nod to his campaign strategy, where they really did focus a lot on making inroads with Latino voters that were a really difficult area for him in 2016. They devoted a lot of resources and organizers to getting into Latino communities in particular. Young voters have long been a base of support for Bernie Sanders. However, I do think that what we've seen is a warning sign for Bernie Sanders, in particular as it pertains to young voters. While they turned out, they did not turn out in as great of numbers as they did for him in 2016. Even in the states that he was able to declare victory in. And so if he's going to take back the mantle of frontrunner, he's going to need to recalibrate how he is engaging folks and how he's turning out voters that are often notoriously difficult to get to the polls come Election Day.
Okay, say Bernie Sanders actually wins the nomination. Who should his running mate be? As much as they went at each other, it wouldn't surprise me to see him pick Elizabeth Warren. Despite their differences, they're pretty much aligned on the ideological spectrum. There were those among his supporters that would have liked him to pick Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. The only problem there is that she's not old enough. Minimum age for the office of vice president, just like the president, is 35. Sanders might even want to balance the ticket with a more moderate Democrat. Even though he's supporting Biden right now, and we are playing what if, Pete Buttigieg might be a consideration. With Sanders' age and health being of concern, the former mayor of South Bend brings youth into the office, just in case kind of thing. Sanders can go completely out of the box and choose somebody like Stacey Abrams of Georgia. Her campaign for governor opened a lot of eyes within the party, and she could easily be groomed to run after Sanders' first term. All right, let's look at the possibilities for Joe Biden. I think because of him being a moderate, the list of running mates is a little more intriguing. Biden could run with Warren. Although she really hadn't caught on with the electorate, moderates could be swayed to support her. Joaquin Castro, a 30-something representative that could be a bridge to an ever-increasing Latino electorate. There's also history between he and Biden having worked in the Obama administration. Here's Stacey Abrams again, a proven commodity in the state of Georgia with an impeccable track record. Having the first black female vice president could be an important first step in repairing the Democratic Party's relationship with black voters. Andrew Gilliam, the 40-something-year-old gubernatorial candidate out of Florida who came within an eyelash of winning back in 2018. The former mayor of Tallahassee would bring a much-needed youthful energy to Biden's office. My personal choice as a running mate was my original choice for the nomination, Sherrod Brown of Ohio. He considered running at one time but decided against it. Brown is the kind of Democrat that would bring a lot of stability and credibility to the White House. He's a proven leader with a record that Ohioans keep sending him back to Washington for. He could also be groomed for a run in 2024. No matter how all of this shakes out, one thing is certain. If this country is ever going to get back to some sense of decency and normalcy, whatever that is, Democrats must ultimately not only support the eventual nominee, but they must also get out and vote like their lives depended on it. And don't forget about keeping the House and taking back the Senate. There are a slew of Republican cowards that abandoned the party to drink the Trump Kool-Aid. And because of that, not only do we have a deficit over $2 trillion as of this episode, we have the first major health crisis under Trump, and frankly, he is failing. Mitch McConnell must be removed from office and sit packing back to Kentucky. Actually, anywhere but Kentucky. We don't want him back here either. So if you're in one of the upcoming primary states, please make sure you get to the polls. Make it a family affair and take everybody. It's a great learning experience and a great way to spend time with the kids. It's really too important for you not to. Coming up next week, we're going to take a cold, hard look at the music industry. Maybe you've seen the headlines about Megan Thee Stallion and the god-awful record deal that she got into with her label. Well, we'll look at that and some other really bad record deals that some of your favorite artists got into. That's next week on Gunshots Straight from the Hip. You've been listening to Gunshots Straight from the Hip. The views expressed are those of the host and guests and not reflective of any business entity or anyone associated with this broadcast. If you have any comments or want more information on how to be a sponsor, log on to our website at markgunmedia.com or call us at 502-407-0283. That's 502-407-0283. Thank you for listening.
Mark Gun Media. No hype, no hoopla, just damn good work.